From this film, you will learn how to enure the dog perceive mechanical stimuli correctly. Also, you will learn how to use them in training so as to minimize the possibility of stress for the dog. It's good to know that you should inure your dog to mechanical stimuli gradually, that is, according to its age and level of training. Inurement to mechanical stimuli has two stages. But first, let's get all this straightened out. What's the difference between dogs inured to mechanics and dogs which haven't been inured to mechanics? Dogs which haven't been inured to mechanics, when mechanics is used very often, act like wild animals and demonstrate defensive reaction. Now healer has a role of the mechanical stimuli. The dog inured to mechanics responds to mechanical stimuli psychologically calmer. It doesn't panic but obeys them, that is, it behaves like a pet. Moreover, the faster and more accurate the dog obeys mechanics and the less stress it experiences while training, the better it is for training. For simplicity and convenience of further explanation, exclusively within the framework of this film, let's denote these differences in the dog behavior in response to the mechanical stimuli as the existence of wild and domestic types of dog behavior. Let's now examine the wild form of behavior in more detail. Rejection and resistance of mechanics on the part of the dog can take many various forms. Within the limits of the wild form of behavior, we can mark 5 options. The first option is ignoring the impacts. The dog simply does not notice them, either because they are too weak for it or because the dog has got used to them. The second option is a passive defensive reaction. The dog is either stock still or moves on a silent basis but behaves in slow motion. The third option is the active defensive reaction in the form of aggression. The dog rolls, rocks, bites the leash, or even tries to bite a person. The fourth option is the active defensive reaction in the form of escape. The dog tries to escape, get out of the collar, and run away. The fifth option, the dog begs the master not to be tormented. It shows signals of reconciliation, licks his hands, and offers to play. That is, it tries to distract the master from training in every possible way. It simply offers chatting. Now let's talk about how in terms of the training processes take place the inurement of the dog to mechanical stimuli. As a result of proper training, the dog, which is dominated by the wild form of behavior, must turn into the dog dominated by the domestic form of behavior. This happens in 2 steps. First, the sensitivity of the wild form of behavior reduces, so now, as a result, in this case, there is a great need for a very strong stimulation. On the second stage, we work with the domestic form of behavior. We increase its sensitivity. As a result, to launch the domestic form of behavior, very little stimulation is required. It is important to understand that wild form of behavior doesn't disappear, simply and solely its sensitivity drops. In a stressful situation, the dog may respond using wild form of behavior, putting aside all its cultural skills. Now let's consider in detail the work of inuring the dog to mechanical stimuli on the first 2 stages. First step. For enurement of the dog to mechanical stimuli, we need both decrease and then increase of sensitivity of the reaction to the stimulus, but they will be directed to different forms of behavior. The process of reducing sensitivity to the stimulus is used to break the wild type of behavior. The process of increasing sensitivity is used to develop and strengthen the domestic form of behavior. Now you see work towards reducing sensitivity of the reaction. The reaction we are working on is called the wild form of behavior. We don't need it because it will be in our road when training the dog. Thanks to the dog habituation to various influences, we can observe retardation of the wild form of behavior. Second step. At this stage, it is necessary to increase sensitivity of response to the influence and to make the behavior more responsive, more reactive in response to the stimulus. But the behavior in question now is the domestic form of behavior. We need to teach the dog have correct reaction to mechanical stimuli. It must respond by submission and plasticity. This gets possible only after we have slowed down the demonstration of the wild form of behavior. Wild and domestic forms of behavior contradict one another. So first, the wild form of behavior is hindered, and only then the domestic form of behavior develops and strengthens. As a result, in response to the mechanical stimulus, the dog reacts by submission instead of opposition. By submission, one should understand not a passive suppression because of fear, but the accomplishment of the necessary action. Very often, the person wants the dog to perform this action quickly and actively. In this film, we told about two forms of the dog's behavior, wild and domestic forms. Also, we described two stages of work. The first stage is the inhibition of wild behavior, and the second stage is the development of domestic behavior. In order to properly go through these stages, it is necessary to observe three rules. The first rule, synchronization. The second rule, compensation. The third rule, short cycle. These are the points we are going to discuss in our next video about the command heel. And if you liked our video, subscribe to our channel for free and like us.